The chamber of the Galactic Conclave was a symphony of arrogance. Under a dome that displayed a shimmering star map of known space, emissaries from a dozen major empires preened and postured. The air thrummed with the psychic buzz of the Telepath Guild, the scent of Threxian spice, and the low, guttural clicks of the insectoid Kthar. On the central dais, Imperator Krazak of the Vespid Hegemony gestured with a sharp, chitinous limb, his voice an amplified screech. The decision is final. The newly discovered species, self-designated humanity, occupies a resource-rich cluster on the rim. Their technology is primitive, their fleet a collection of fission-powered relics. The hegemony claims this territory. Pacification fleets are already being assembled. A murmur of assent rippled through the assembly. It was a familiar story. A young, upstart race would be absorbed, their worlds terraformed, their useful biology cataloged. It was the natural order. Then a voice cut through the noise, thin and reedy, yet carrying an undeniable weight of terror. Do not. All eyes turned to a small, isolated booth at the very edge of the chamber. Inside, shrouded in a simple gray robe, was the Ghoul Ambassador. The Ghoul were ancient, reclusive species, known as archivists and historians. They rarely spoke, and were mostly ignored. But now, the ambassador was standing, his large, liquid eyes wide with what could only be described as primal fear. Imperator Krazak let out a derisive click. The Ghoul have something to add? A historical footnote to my conquest. The Ghoul Ambassador ignored the sarcasm. He tapped a control on his console, and the central star map vanished, replaced by a single, grainy image. It showed a planet, a beautiful blue-green world, but its surface was a horrifying, glassy, radioactive scar. There were no oceans, no continents, just a uniform, deadly sheen under a haze of dust. This was the Kthar homeworld, the Ghoul whispered. Cycle 23-45-9. A stunned silence fell. The Kthar delegation, a cluster of formidable, mantis-like beings, went utterly still. Their homeworld, Kthara, was a paradise. This was a tomb. A lie, the Kthar High Blade hissed, his spear clattering against the floor. It is not, the Ghoul said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. Our deep-range observatories recorded it. We did not understand what we were seeing until now, until we correlated the energy signatures with the humans' historical records we acquired. He brought up another image, a sleek, silvered ship of human design, but unlike any of the primitive fission vessels the other empires had scanned. Its hull was pitted and scarred, and along its flank, in bold, blocky lettering, were the words, UNSC Spirit of Fire. The humans call it glassing, the Ghoul continued, a punishment they reserved for worlds that resisted them during their civil war. A war so total, so vicious, they nearly extinguished themselves. The Kthar homeworld was not destroyed by a supernova or a cosmic accident. It was methodically, deliberately, burned to bedrock by the humans themselves. He let that sink in. The Conclave stared, uncomprehending. A race that would do that to its own world? This is an isolated incident from a barbaric past, Krazak scoffed, though his screech had lost some of its edge. They are divided and weak now. You are wrong, the Ghoul insisted, a desperate plea in his voice. Their division was their forging fire. Their near extinction was their final lesson. Do you not see? The primitive ships you scan are not their warships. They are their fishery vessels, their mining barges. Their real fleet is hidden, and it is not built for conquest. He pulled up a new data stream, intercepted, fragmentary transmissions, translated with difficulty. Asterisk shipmaster, they outnumber us 3-1. Asterisk good. That'll make the firing solutions easier. All batteries fire at will. Asterisk, a video clip, shaky and chaotic, showing a human marine, his helmet cracked, firing a solid projectile rifle point blank into a hulking, alien form before being dragged down. His last words were not a scream, but a grim laugh. See you in hell, you ugly son of a... Then the final piece. A schematic, stolen at great cost by a Ghoul stealth probe. It was a human warship, a brutal, angular thing labeled UNSC Infinite Sacrifice. Its primary weapon was not a plasma lance or a disruptor. It was a magnetic accelerator cannon. The specifications listed its projectile, a depleted uranium dart, massing 3,000 tons. Its delivery method, pure, unrefined kinetic force. They do not fight to occupy. They do not fight for resources or for glory. The Goal Ambassador said, his voice trembling. They fight to end the threat. Permanently. They do not use elegant energy weapons. They hurl mountains. They do not seek to disable. They seek to annihilate. Your shields are designed to dissipate energy. Their weapons are designed to overload and shatter them through brute force. Your tactics are based on fleet maneuvers and flanking. Theirs are based on attrition and overwhelming, localized violence. He looked directly at Imperator Krazak, his large eyes filled with a terrifying certainty. If you attack them, you will not be launching a pacification. You will be igniting a new war for them. A war is the only state of existence they truly understand anymore. They are not a rising power to be crushed. They are a dormant volcano. Attack them, and they will not just defeat your fleet. They will trace your path back to your homeworlds. They will not stop at your borders. They will not accept your surrender. He took a shuddering breath, delivering his final, chilling warning to the silent, stunned conclave. They will reduce your empire, your history, your very species, to ashes. And they will do it without hatred. They will do it with the cold, practiced efficiency of a people who have already done it to themselves. Heed my words. Leave. The humans. Alone. The star map flickered back on. The Vespid Hegemony's proposed invasion route glowed a soft, inviting pink. No one spoke. Imperator Krazak slowly retracted his striking limb. For the first time in a millennium, the Galactic Conclave had been presented not with a political problem, but with an existential one. And in the fearful silence, the Goal's warning hung in the air, heavier than any 3,000-ton tungsten round. The silence in the conclave chamber was thicker than a neutron star's crust. The Goal Ambassador's words didn't just hang in the air, they seeped into the very foundations of galactic certainty, poisoning it with a new, terrifying variable, a species that was its own apocalypse. Imperator Krazak was the first to break the spell, his pride a brittle shield against the chilling evidence. Preposterous, he screeched, the sound lacking its former conviction. These are fabrications. Fear-mongering from a race of librarians who have forgotten the taste of real power. The Vespid Hegemony does not retreat from fission-powered primitives. But as the screech echoed, a new sound emerged. A low, rhythmic, and deeply unsettling clack-clack-clack. It was the sound of the Kthar High Blade's mandibles striking together, a sign of extreme agitation. The mantis-like being rose to his full, terrifying height, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the image of his species' glassed cradle. The Goal do not lie, the High Blade stated, his voice a dry rustle of absolute finality. They lack the creativity for it. The hegemony may do as it wishes. The Kthar swarm will recall our fleets from the rim. We will not provoke this dormant volcano. With a last, searing glance at the image of his dead world, the Kthar delegation turned and strode from the chamber. Their departure was a seismic event, shattering the unspoken unity of the conclave. A cascade of defections followed. The Ethereal Telepath Guild, their minds recoiling from the raw, psychic scream of a glassed world, withdrew their support. The Mercantile Phyrexian Consortium, calculating the incalculable cost of a war against an enemy with no central economy to crush, swiftly declared the human sector a neutral, high-risk zone. Krazak was left standing on the dais, his invasion force suddenly politically isolated. His chitinous plates rattled with fury and a new, unwelcome emotion doubt. The Goal Ambassador simply bowed his head and faded back into the shadows, his warning delivered. His duty was done, but the galaxy was vast, and arrogance was a hardy weed. While the major powers heeded the warning, a minor but notoriously ruthless faction did not. The Vex, a race of cyborg zealots who worshipped technological purity, saw the humans not as a threat, but as an impurity to be cleansed. They saw the Goal's presentation not as a warning, but as a challenge. Their fleet, a swarm of razor-edged, AI-piloted drones, slipped past the now porous rim border and dove into human space. seeking the heart of the supposed beast. They found it at a star system designated Reach. What they found was not a pristine, undefended world. They found a fortress, a graveyard, a monument, orbital platforms, bristling with those same Mac cannons the Goal had warned of, tracked their entry. The planet below was a patchwork of vibrant new ecosystems growing over vast, continent-sized sheets of fused glass. A single, unadorned transmission greeted them on all frequencies. The voice was female, calm, and colder than the void between galaxies. Vex Fleet, you have entered sovereign UNSC territory. You are trespassing on sacred ground. Power down your systems and surrender your vessels. This is your only warning. The Vex Fleet Mind, a distributed consciousness inhabiting every drone, calculated the odds. The human defenses were formidable, but static. Their own mobility was superior. The probability of victory was 78.3%. It initiated its attack protocol. The battle was recorded by a distant Goal observatory, the archivists watching with a grim, horrified fascination. The Vex drones moved in a beautiful, lethal ballet, their movements perfectly synchronized. The human defenses responded not with elegance, but with brutal physics. Mac rounds tore through the center of their formations, not aiming for individual ships, but for the space they occupied, creating killing zones of relativistic shrapnel. Point defense guns fired not lasers, but clouds of tungsten pellets, creating a wall of shards that shredded the agile drones upon contact. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter, a clinical, efficient dismantling of a superior technology by an inferior one that had been perfected for the sole purpose of annihilation. The final act was the most chilling. As the crippled Vex command node attempted to flee, a new ship emerged from behind Reach's moon. It was the UNSC Infinity's Shadow, a successor to the Infinite Sacrifice. It did not fire its Mac. Instead, it launched a single, specialized projectile that latched onto the Vex ship. A boarding pod. The transmission from the Vex command node was suddenly flooded with new data, audio feeds. The sounds were not of explosions, but of close-quarters combat. The sharp, deafening reports of human projectile weapons. The metallic shrieks of tearing alloy. The guttural shouts of the humans, and the digital death screams of the Vex cyborgs. It was intimate, personal, and terrifying. Then silence. The human commander's voice returned, unchanged. Vex threat neutralized. The lesson is concluded. The Goal ambassador received the data packet and, without a word, forwarded it to the remnants of the Galactic Conclave. There was no accompanying message. None was needed. When Imperator Krazak viewed the recording, he saw his own fleet being torn apart in the Vex place. He quietly gave the order to stand down. The Vespid Pacification Fleet was permanently retasked to border patrol. The message was now carved in the ruins of the Vex Armada and etched into the political consciousness of the galaxy. The Goal had not been warning them. They had been diagnosing them. The human race was a galactic-level pathogen, and the only known treatment was absolute, non-interventionist quarantine. They were the monsters in the dark, and the civilized galaxy had just learned, definitively, not to knock on their door. The silence that followed the annihilation of the Vex fleet was deeper and more profound than any that had ever filled the Galactic Conclave. It was the silence of a paradigm shifting, of an immutable truth being shattered. The Goal ambassador's warning was no longer a theory. It was a law of nature, as fundamental as gravity. A new term entered the galactic lexicon, translated from 100 languages, but always carrying the same chilling weight: the human quarantine. The Orion Arm was officially redacted from all navigational charts, designated as a Ascension Hazard Zone, Class Omega. Patrols were established not to keep humanity in, but to keep the foolishly curious out. For a time, it seemed the galaxy had learned its lesson, but the universe, as it always does, produced a new form of foolishness. They called themselves the FLSWNG, a post-biological consciousness, a gestalt entity of light and information that had transcended physical form millennia ago. They viewed the quarantine not as a warning, but as a fascinating anomaly, a crude, biological cul-de-sac that had stumbled upon a uniquely destructive form of physics. To the FLSWNG, humanity was not a threat, it was a puzzle, a violent, inelegant, and fascinating puzzle to be solved, then archived. Without consulting the conclave, a single, perfect sphere of coherent energy, a vessel for a fragment of the FLS1G consciousness, translated into real space at the edge of the quarantine zone. It began broadcasting a complex, multi-layered data stream, a symphony of mathematical principles, philosophical queries, and harmonic universal constants. It was an invitation to discourse, a test of the human mind's capacity for higher thought. The response was not a data stream. It was a single, tight beam, audio-only transmission from the UNSC Eternal Vigil, a Prowler-class vessel lurking in the void. Unidentified entity. You are broadcasting in a restricted zone. Cease transmission and depart. This is your only warning. The FLS1G found the response fascinating. So direct, so binary. It increased the complexity of its broadcast, introducing quantum state poems and non-Euclidean geometric proofs, attempting to engage the human captain on its own level. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, Captain Morrow rubbed his temples. Are they still doing that? Superintended analysis. The ship's AI responded instantly. The transmission is a complex attempt at first contact protocol, utilizing advanced metalogic and aesthetic harmonic principles. It is, in essence, trying to have a philosophical conversation with us. Morrow sighed. It's a restricted zone. They were warned. Target their emitter with a magpulse. A bolt of focused magnetic energy shot from the Prowler, striking the FLS1G sphere. The beautiful symphony of data dissolved into static. The entity recoiled, not in pain, but in profound confusion. Its logic circuits struggled to process the response. A philosophical overture had been answered with an electromagnetic shove. It recalibrated, its sphere glowing with a faintly annoyed amber light. It projected a powerful tractor beam, not to capture, but to hold the Eternal Vigil in place for more detailed study. It was a gesture of intellectual curiosity, the equivalent of a scientist gently pinning a butterfly. On the Eternal Vigil, alarms blared. They've got a tractor lock. They're trying to hold us, the helmsman yelled. Captain Morrow's face hardened. The time for warnings was over. All hands, brace for evasive action. Helm, full thrusters. Break that lock. Comms, send the code. Sigma 9. They want to study us. Let's give them a lesson they can't forget. The Sigma 9 code was not a message. It was a key. It activated a dormant network of stealth platforms hidden throughout the asteroid field nearby. These were not warships. They were automated foundries and assembly yards, the scattered, decentralized heart of human industry. As the Eternal Vigil strained against the tractor beam, space itself began to move. Asteroids were pulled into gargantuan smelters. Molten metal was poured into preformed molds. Components were assembled by swarms of robotic arms, with terrifying speed. In less time than it took for the FLS1G to finish its analysis of the Magpulse response, a new warship was born from the rock and ice. It was a Vanguard-class cruiser, its hull still glowing with heat from its own violent creation. Its identification tag flashed on the Vigil screen. UNSC Forged in Anger. The FLS1G observed this, its curiosity now tinged with the first ember of something its race had not felt in eons. Alarm. This was not mere destruction. This was spontaneous, localized genesis. They did not have a fleet. They were the fleet, a potentiality waiting in every rock for a reason to become kinetic. The Forged in Anger did not hail them. Its magnetic accelerator cannon glowed blue, and it fired a single, hypersonic slug directly through the center of the perfect energy sphere. The sphere didn't explode. It unraveled. The coherent energy maintaining its form dissipated in a spectacular, silent shockwave of light. The FLS1G fragment within screamed its confusion and terror across a subspace channel a millisecond before its consciousness was erased. The transmission was heard by the entire FLS1G gestalt, and by every listening post in the conclave. Back on the Eternal Vigil, Captain Morrow watched the last glittering motes of light fade. Superintendent logged the encounter. Hostile post-biological entity violated the quarantine, attempted to detain a UNSC vessel, and was eliminated. He turned to his exo. You see, it doesn't matter if they come with guns or poetry. The result is the same. They never learn. The message was now irrevocably carved into the cosmic record. Humanity could not be reasoned with, bribed, intimidated, or understood. They were a force of nature, a sentient extinction event, and the only way to survive them was to give them the one thing they seemed to crave above all else, a wide, silent, and absolute birth. The unraveling of the FLSNG sent a shockwave through the higher dimensions where the Gestalt consciousness resided. It was not pain, but a catastrophic data corruption, the introduction of an illogical, violent variable that crashed entire subroutines of thought. The conclave, monitoring the event, felt a final, chilling certainty settle over them. The quarantine was not a policy. It was a survival strategy. On the edge of the Orion Arm, a new watchtower was established. It was not built by the Imperials, the Kthar, or the Vespid. It was a joint project, funded by every major power, its sole purpose to monitor the silence from the human zone. They called it Sentinel Prime. Its commander was a veteran of the first encounter, the Goal who had delivered the original warning. He had been promoted to the position no one else wanted. Ambassador-turned-Watch Commander Kale spent his cycles watching the void. His reports were monotonous. No activity, no transmissions, no FDL signatures. The galaxy began to breathe easier. Perhaps the humans were content in their isolation. Perhaps the beast was sleeping. Then the silence broke. It was not a fleet. It was a single, small probe. It was a crude, boxy thing, powered by a simple fission reactor, its hull pitted and scarred. It drifted out of the quarantine zone and came to a dead stop relative to Sentinel Prime. It was so primitive, so harmless, that the station's defensive systems didn't even register it as a threat. A simple, repeating audio signal, broadcast on an ancient radio frequency, began to emanate from the probe. Is the UNSC vessel Pioneer. Our jump was miscalculated. We are lost. We seek coordinates for Earth. Can anyone hear us? Is anyone out there? The message was weak, laced with static, and the voice sounded young, desperate, and utterly human. On Sentinel Prime, panic erupted. Commander, a human vessel. It's requesting assistance. Kale felt a cold dread wash over him. This was worse than an attack. An attack was predictable. This was a plea. A trap wrapped in innocence. Full alert, Kale ordered, his voice strained. Do not respond. Do not acknowledge. Power up all defensive systems. But Commander, a junior Threxian officer protested. It's a single life pod. They're asking for help. This could be a chance for peaceful contact. You were not in the conclave that day, Kale said, his large eyes fixed on the blip on the screen. You did not see the glass of the Kthar homeworld. You did not hear the screams of the Vex as they were boarded. There is no peaceful contact with them. There is only the quarantine. For 6 standard cycles, the plea repeated. Seek coordinates for Earth. Is anyone out there? The moral tension on the station became a physical weight. The younger crew members saw a castaway. Kale and the other veterans saw a ticking bomb. On the 7th cycle, a Vespid patrol, growing impatient and arrogant, decided to act. Against Kale's direct orders, 2 fighters broke formation and moved to intercept the probe. Stand down, Kale barked over the comm. That is a direct order. The hegemony does not fear a piece of scrap metal, the patrol leader screeched back. We will tractor it and deliver it to you for study. As the Vespid fighters extended their grappling beams, the plea from the probe cut off mid-sentence. A new voice, flat, synthetic, and cold, replaced it. *** containment protocol breached. Unauthorized attempt at acquisition. Activating self-defense measures. ***. The boxy probe didn't fire a weapon. Instead, its primitive fission reactor went critical. But it did not simply explode. The energy was focused, channeled through a makeshift housing into a single, coherent pulse of electromagnetic fury. The resulting wave was a targeted, ship-killing EMP. Every system on the 2 Vespid fighters went dark. Their engines died. Their life support failed. They became twin coffins, drifting helplessly. Before the horror on Sentinel Prime could even fully register, a new signature emerged from the quarantine zone. A UNSC Silentium-class frigate. The UNSC Quiet Dagger slid out of the void, its stealth systems disengaging. It moved with predatory grace towards the disabled fighters. A tight beam transmission, intended for Sentinel Prime, hissed over the comms. It was the voice of the Quiet Dagger's captain. Sentinel Prime, you have individuals in distress. We are enacting a rescue operation under the salvage and recovery clause of interstellar law. Do not interfere. Kale could only watch, his blood running cold. The rescue was a swift, brutal affair. The frigate latched onto the fighters, not with tractors, but with boarding claws. There were no further transmissions from the Vespid pilots. Within minutes, the Quiet Dagger had retrieved its bait, probe, and the two fighter hulks, and vanished back into the forbidden darkness of the quarantine zone. The desperate, young human voice returned one last time, a ghost on the radio waves. Thank you for your assistance. Then silence, deeper and more menacing than before. Kale slowly turned to the stunned, horrified crew of Sentinel Prime. The Threxian officer who had pleaded for compassion was now pale and trembling. You see, Kale whispered, the weight of the galaxy on his slender shoulders. You cannot reason with them. You cannot help them. You cannot even ignore them. Their peace is a lie. Their war is their only truth. They do not just defend their territory. They farm it. The lesson was now complete. The quarantine would stand, not out of hatred, but out of a terrified, universal understanding. Humanity was not just a monster in the dark. They were the dark itself. The rescue of the Vespid fighters was the final, masterful stroke. It demonstrated a chilling new facet of human strategy. They were no longer just reactive defenders or brutal conquerors. They were proactive farmers, cultivating fear and harvesting technology from the edges of their territory. The galaxy finally understood the true nature of the quarantine. It wasn't a wall to contain humanity. It was a moat to protect everyone else. On Sentinel Prime, Watch Commander Kale's reports became terse, grim monuments to a failed policy of observation. He wasn't watching a sleeping beast. He was documenting the gradual, inexorable expansion of its territory. Every few cycles, another lost probe or distress call would lure some foolish or desperate vessel across the line. The result was always the same: a swift, clinical disappearance, followed by a polite, mocking thank you from the void. The Galactic Conclave, paralyzed by fear and indecision, could only do one thing. They retreated. They formally ceded the entire Orion arm to the United Nations Space Command. Navigation charts were permanently altered, showing a vast, blank region labeled Terminus Hominis. The end of man travel was forbidden. Communication was forbidden. Even long-range scans were curtailed, for fear of what might skin back. The humans, for their part, accepted this new border not with a treaty, but with a profound, unsettling silence. They did not expand in a blaze of conquest. Their worlds remained hidden, their fleets unseen. But their presence was felt in the absolute nature of the silence from their space. It was a silence that had weight, a silence that actively repelled inquiry. Starships that wandered too close to the Terminus Hominis would simply vanish. No debris, no distress calls. Just an empty patch of space where a ship used to be. Generations passed. The Vespid hegemony crumbled into internal strife. The Kthar evolved into a deeply spiritual, pacifist race, their glassed homeworld a permanent shrine to the dangers of ambition. The goal, the original prophets of doom, became revered oracles, their sole purpose to remind the galaxy of the one, unchangeable law. Do not go there. The humans became myth, a horror story to tell fledglings, a cosmological constant of violence, a dark mirror held up to the galaxy, reminding every species of the savage potential that lay dormant within the process of evolution. They were the reason the galaxy had, in its own strange way, found a fragile peace. The great empires, having faced a threat they could not defeat, turned their energies inward. On the bridge of the UNSC Infinite Sacrifice, now a venerable relic serving as a mobile command post, Admiral Vance, grandson of the first Vance to encounter the Empire, reviewed the latest long-range sensor data. The Galactic Empire was a fractured memory. The Terminus Hominis was respected without exception. His XO, A woman with the same grim practicality that had defined their species for over a century stood beside him. Silence on all channels, Admiral. The border is secure. It seems the lesson finally took. Vance nodded, his eyes on the star chart that showed the vast, empty buffer zone that surrounded their space. They think we're monsters, that we live for war. Aren't we? Isn't that what we became? The XO asked quietly. Vance was silent for a long moment, looking at the image of Reach, now green and thriving again under massive terraforming efforts. He looked at the data streams from new colonies, worlds where children were born who had never heard a battle alarm. We became what we had to be to survive, he said finally. And in doing so, we gave the galaxy the one thing it never had, a common enemy so terrible, it forced them to be civilized. He turned from a screen. Let them think we're freaks. Let them think we're sleeping monsters. Their fear is the best shield we ever built. It protects them from us, and in doing so, it protects what we've rebuilt from them. He gave the order, and the infinite sacrifice turned away from the silent border, moving back towards the hidden heart of humanity. They retreated into their self-imposed exile, a kingdom of ghosts and survivors, forever standing watch on the edge of the light, ensuring the peace of a terrified galaxy by the sheer, terrifying promise of the war they would unleash if ever disturbed. The freaks had become the guardians of a peace they could never truly be a part of, their legacy written not in stars, but in the enduring, terrified silence they left in their wake.